We're good to go.
We're good to go.
So welcome to Creative Life once more. And if it's your first time here, great welcome. We'll give you some information when we do our collection. We always do a collection. I mean, that's historic. You know, in any kind of house of worship, you do a collection. And we're no exception to that. There's a young girl was in church with her mother, and the preacher was droning on and on and on. And finally he said, and in conclusion, and the little girl looked at her mother and said, "What does in conclusion mean?" And the mother said, "When the preacher says it, absolutely nothing." I hope not to be that preacher tonight. I call this talk "The Way Out is Through." I did it for a reason, and I'll explain that shortly. God doesn't give us what we necessarily want. God gives us what we believe. And I know some of you are allergic to the word God, so just bear with me. I don't mean that that big guy in the sky sitting on a throne dishing out favors and punishing others. No, I mean the allness. It's really true. Ernest Holmes said that, what we concentrate on tends to become our reality. And Jesus said it actually perfectly. He said, "It's done unto you as you believe." We define belief here as thought plus feeling. Back in 1906, in the early hours of the morning, about 5 o'clock in the morning, there were 2 major earthquakes. And the net result was that the city of San Francisco was just devastated. By the time it finished, there was enormous damage. The earthquake could actually be felt as far away as Cape Town in South Africa, which seems kind of incredible. Water mains ruptured, fires burst out everywhere. By the time it was all over, there's the equivalent in today's money of about $12.5 billion in destruction. Not to mention the fact that 700 people died and 250,000 people were made homeless. In fact, the famous writer from San Francisco, Jack London, said at the time, surrender was complete. People were obviously really distressed, and most of them just didn't have a clue what to do. A couple of years earlier, a gentleman called Amedeo Giannini had started a bank called the Bank of Italy. When everything settled down, he went out and he looked at his buildings, and he saw that the buildings of his bank had been destroyed. However, the vaults were still in good shape. So instead of just becoming morbid and just not knowing what to do like the people around him, he had this vision. He'd always had this vision of starting a great bank and having it grow through branches so that it was actually connected with the people. So when he looked at the devastation, instead of just seeing that and wondering, what am I going to do, he knew what he was going to do. He realized that the first thing that people wanted was to rebuild their lives. And he figured the easiest way to do this was through the merchants, through the business owners. So he told his people to set up 2 barrels, put planks across. He sent them back to the bank, and he told them to bring money. They brought money, and just on the strength of their promise, he started lending money. Just an oral promise. He wrote a note of it, and just on the oral promise, he lent money to people, and they started to rebuild their lives, because this is what he saw. He did not see the destruction. He saw right through it. He saw through to what was needed. By the time it came to repay the loans, every single one of those loans was repaid. Because he had the faith. He had the faith and the belief to know that this would happen. He actually went on to become one of the biggest banks in the world. The bank that he ultimately became through spreading branch banking is called the Bank of America. And I know you've all heard of it. And that was Amedeo Giannini. See, the difference between him and a lot of the people around him was the fact that he knew what to do. He had the faith what to do. He had the belief and he had the thought. See, Jesus told us, pray constantly. The reason he said that is because you are connected to a universal mind. That universal mind is always on. And it's your choice whether what you put into that mind is going to work for you or it's going to work against you. Amadeo may not have consciously been aware of this, but he was connected to that mind. He knew he was, and the thoughts he put in were good thoughts, and they produced good fruit. The way out is through your own consciousness, because your own consciousness is connected to the universal subconscious, or the universal subjective. And in science of mind terms, we call that the law. The law is that aspect of God that actually is creative. And it's creative through the impress of thoughts and feelings. Your thoughts and feelings, my thoughts and feelings. Whether you're doing it consciously or unconsciously, it's happening all the time. So I just said to you, be like Amadeo and put in good thoughts. And the reason Jesus told us to pray constantly was he meant to be aware. Be aware of your thoughts. It's not the individual thoughts that cause things to happen. It's your pattern of thinking over time. And as you push that pattern into the universal subconscious, it comes back to you. You all know people who actually go around with a black cloud over them, right? And things are always raining on them. Why? They're putting into their conscious and the universal subconscious things that come back to them. They don't want them, but that's what they're doing. Another person who really caught my attention was, there's a lady called Immaculée, and she was actually in Rwanda when her life was transformed. You know, she was living a happy life. She was a university student. And then, as you know, genocide started taking place. People were being killed. People like Immaculée and her tribe were being killed just because of who they were. The people doing the killing actually called them cockroaches. However, she was lucky because, like Anna Frank decades before her, a pastor of the opposite tribe took her and 7 other girls in and hid them in a closet. He hid them actually in a bathroom closet. They stayed there for the best part of 3 months. When she went in there, she weighed over 100 pounds. When she came out, she weighed 65 pounds. She spent the first part of that captivity seething at the people who were actually doing this to her tribe. And she realized finally that this anger, this hatred, was eating her alive, literally. She then went back to her childhood, and she remembered that her father had given her some rosaries. She started to pray the rosary, and she started to pray to God. Her faith came back, and she transformed herself from hatred into being in a position where she could actually start to feel like she could forgive these people. And the reason she could do that was because she had a faith in something greater than herself. You know, Ernest Holmes, our founder, tells us there is a power greater than you are, right where you are right now, and you can use it. She may have been doing this unconsciously, but she was using that power. She transformed herself into a person who was hating, into a person who could actually start to forgive. So by the time she came out of that captivity, she was able to stare down a man with a machete, and he put the machete down and he let her go. She actually confronted the killers of her mother and her sister, and she looked them straight in the eyes, and she said, "I forgive you." Also in captivity, she spoke no English when she went in there, She taught herself English just using two things, a Bible and a dictionary. And she came out being able to understand English. The net result was that she got a job with the United Nations, from which she actually managed to get into the US, working for the United Nations. A gentleman I'm sure many of you in this room have heard of, Dr. Wayne Dyer, heard about the book that she was encouraged to write about her experiences. And he took her under his wing. He helped her publish the book. And the book was a success. And I don't know if Barbara, my wife, remembers it, but we actually saw all this on PBS. Do you remember? It was incredibly touching. See, what Immaculate did was she went back into her faith. And her faith was her connection with that universal subconscious. And she also realized that because of her belief, she could actually overcome that hatred and she could actually start to love again. You know, the Second Vatican Council of the Catholic Church, which took place back in the 50s or 60s, said there are many paths to God. When Ernest Holmes, our founder, started Science of Mind, he did not intend it to be a separate religion. He intended people to come, to listen to what he had to say, and then to go back to their own places of worship and just become a better Protestant, a better Catholic, a better Hindu, a better Jew, a better Muslim. He was not intending to convert anyone. He just said, you come to us and we will teach you how to believe. And then you go back to your own place and you can become much better at whatever you are. Eventually, because of lots of different reasons, it became a separate religion, which is what we are today, Science of Mind. See, there is always a light at the end of the tunnel. However, the truth of it is, you have to walk through that tunnel. And the tunnel is your own consciousness. When you walk through that tunnel and you walk in faith, you have belief, then things start to happen magically. Another lady, her name was Mary. She was living happily over in England until she was about 38 years old. When she was 38 years old, her husband, whom she loved tremendously, passed away suddenly. She was left with a 4-year-old son. Her father-in-law, whom she didn't get along with because he was a Protestant, she was a Catholic, he thought the only thing worse than a Catholic was a communist, and he wasn't too sure about that. So that her husband and his father had been in business together. They ran a business. When her husband died, her father-in-law decided he was old enough, he was going to retire. He sold the business, he sold the house they were living in. He did not invite her to go and live with him. So she and her 4-year-old son had to move down into the city center in a not very salubrious area and live with her parents, one of whom ran a little shop and the other was an engineer. However, she had a burning desire. Her burning desire was this. She was determined that her son would get a good education and he would actually have a much better life than she had. As a Catholic, her faith system was based on that. However, the nearest school to which she had to send her son, it's kind of like here, like districts, was just a stone's throw away. It had the worst record in the whole city, if not the whole area. See, at that time, when a child was 10, 11 years old, they had to sit a special exam in 2 parts. It was called the 11 plus exam. If you passed the first part, you're allowed to take the second. If you passed the second, you were allowed to go to a good school. And here it would be in the highest stream in the school. There, it was a separate school completely. So the people throughout the country who passed this exam were allowed to go into these special schools. And then there was one level down and one level down from that. The school that her son attended was called St. Anne's. No kids from St. Anne's ever passed the 11 plus exam. They were taught by nuns. However, even so, none of them ever passed. Until the year that her son turned 11. In that year, 8 people passed, 4 boys and 4 girls. The reason why her son passed was because she had this burning desire, and she actually managed to instill in him the fact that he could do this. She struggled throughout his school until he was 18. And then she realized that she had obtained what she wanted. And the reason she did this was because she never ever lost track of her faith. She always had that belief that she would succeed in get a good education and then go to college. She just knew this. See, she was connected with that one power. She was connected through her conscious mind and subconscious mind into that universal subjective. See, when we're connected with something greater than ourselves, wonderful things can happen. I'll give you a really simple example that may explain it. When Barbara and I were in Hawaii, and by the way, my idea of winter is Maui. It is not this. We were on Maui, and we were attending a convention. At this convention, we were required to break a 1-inch thick board, karate style. The instructor told us quite clearly we could all do it. And eventually, everyone, and I forget how many people were there, about 60, 80? There are a lot of people there. Even a French-Canadian lady sat in a wheelchair finally managed to break the board. He told us this. He said, yeah, there's a technique, and I'll teach you the technique on how to hit the board. However, you've got to look beyond the board. If anytime, even up to the last second, you lose focus and you focus on the board, it won't break. But when you look beyond the board is going to smash. So when you're looking at a problem through a tunnel, you don't see the problem. You see the light at the end of the tunnel. You see the objective. When you have that burning desire, God, the universal subjective, will give you exactly what you want. Now, the 3 people I told you about were doing this unconsciously. They were not doing it consciously. When you come to a center like this, we teach you how to do it consciously. And it's called Affirmative Prayer. It's in 5 steps. It's very easy. When you come to our classes, we teach you. But I'll just go over it very briefly now. The first point is to recognize that God is all there is. That there is nothing outside of God. The second thing is to recognize that since God is all there is, then you also are an aspect of that divine presence. And as an aspect of that divine presence, and as a being that has been given the ability to think and to reason, you actually are part of the attributes of God. So therefore, the attributes coming from God are your attributes too. And when you realize that and you pray in that manner, just knowing that what you are praying for is going to happen, and then you release it and allow God to take its place, then things happen. And one final thing is gratitude. Because gratitude is one of the things that makes the world turn around. So I'm going to leave you tonight with just this message. Pardon? Oh, okay. Well, I'm not going to physically leave, actually. I'm going to be around for a few minutes. But the point is this, that when you believe in your own way and in your own life that you can achieve things, think wonderful things will happen. When you keep focus and you have that belief in focus, great things will happen. Just like Amadeo who not only managed to help rebuild the city of San Francisco, built the biggest bank in the world. Immaculate, who actually not only survived this Holocaust, she actually prospered afterwards. And like Mary, who managed to get her son educated, you too can do wonderful things. And by the way, Mary was my mother. So I am proud of her. I've said some things about her because she didn't have a wonderful side all the time. However, she had this burning determination to build me up. You know? We usually end our talks this way. We end it with prayer. So just in your own way, just be with me now as I pray. I know that there is one life. I know that that life is God. Spirit, universal intelligence. I know that it is in and through all things. It's in the universe as the biggest planet, the biggest sun. It's in the smallest particle. It's down to a photon. It's in the plants, the bees. It's in all the animals, the fish. It's in every single person. Because it is all these things. And because it's in all these things, I know that it is in me too. I know that it is in each and every person in this room. So I claim for each and every person in this room their highest good. I claim for each and every person in this room that they are able to walk through life in love, that they are able to look at each other person and recognize that they're looking into the face of God. And for all of this, I am truly grateful. And I release this word into the divine, and I call it done, and so it is.
And so it is.